This is a later stream starting around 8 o'clock, so I probably won't get as many viewers because I live on the West Coast, and so a lot of people are asleep by now or whatever, they'll drop off at some point even if they do show up. But even if I don't get any viewers on this stream, I am interested in streaming today just because there were a couple of videos that I really wanted to watch, but I have to react to them on stream. So I just wanted to, quickly come on and do this tonight. And I'm inspired, Your world is an entree. You brown and bubble like mac and cheese. The more I eat, the more I turn to blub. Good evening. We have 1968. We have Carl 2, who just came back from Catholic Mass. Good job. Good boy. All Saints Day. The nature of the cheeses, the puddings, and the peaches. You've only ate a quarter of that pie. Was just watching your new video. Very nice. My world is chicken nuggets. There is McDonald's here. I'll say it is and it's true. There is a cream inside a cream. I'm wide and fat, as you can see. You'll understand when I'm fed. He went to Salem. Yeah, that's right. 1968, lives in Massachusetts. I went to God just to see, and I was looking at cheese, yeah. Saw vegetables were a lie. When I'm God, there's no more pie. The thing is, I'm actually kind of Fat Manson right now myself. And that's why I'm growing my hair so long lately, is because I need to keep it long in order to kind of match. Like, my hair needs to be big in order to match my face being big. You know what I'm saying? I need the ratios to match. Otherwise, it's not quite right. What are we watching? Okay. So, first one I really wanted to watch was this video called Yes, Trump is a Fascist. Because, I've actually kind of gone on the record in saying I don't think he is a fascist. And so, very curious about this. This is only 4 days ago, and it has a lot of views. It has, 300,000 views. It's been recommended to me a lot. I just have to see what's up.
It's literally a floating island of garbage in the middle of the ocean right now. Yeah. I think it's called Puerto Rico.
Out of character for me to speak at a Nazi rally. I was just in Israel, but I took the gig.
As the first Samoan, Malaysian, low IQ, former California prosecutor ever to be elected president, it was just a groundswell of popular support.
Goes well with my turtleneck.
One more week, y'all. We can do this. Yesterday, Trump held a rally at Madison Square Garden in New York, and honestly, I find reporting on rallies lately to be really boring because, yes, Trump said some batty things, and then Kamala called him a fascist. Great. That's frankly no longer particularly newsworthy. But last night's rally was a bit different, just in the level of racist, bigoted, hateful vitriol, which was turned up to 11. Frankly, Trump is feeling the heat because Kamala is out fundraising him, and she's pulling ahead of him in many polls. So he's leaning into what he does best, saying incendiary things in the hopes that his base will be angry enough to show up in droves on election day. And
yeah, Donald Trump is getting kind of desperate now. He's run through all the cards he has. He's just a broken record now. He's got nothing new to offer. He's got no policies. All he can do is whine and criticize the inflation and make up nonsense about the border, spreading this absolute lie that Democrats are soft on the border. And spreading lies about abortions, saying you can now kill babies. There's a new thing now where you can kill babies after they're born. that immigrants are spreading disease and eating cats and dogs. I mean, like, he's got nothing. He's running on fumes now. Whereas Kamala Harris actually has real substantive policies, economic policies that she focuses on, that she talks about. Yeah, which one of those is going to be more exciting? I don't know. To me, someone who actually seems to have any fucking ideas, and is not just a whiny, complainy little bitch, is a little bit more interesting. And I think a lot of Americans are feeling the same way.
And if there aren't enough for him to win, they'll be angry enough to believe the election-stealing lies afterwards, and maybe...
He's been looking really weak and frail, whiny, weaving incoherently. God, I wanted Bobby. No, Bobby sucks. Bobby's a fucking trash heap. Bobby... And you're gonna get Bobby if Trump wins. Assuming you're talking about Robert Kennedy instead of Bob Dobbs.
We succeed in their coup this time. And this hateful xenophobic rhetoric, combined with his connections to Project 2025 and his calls for mass deportations and attacking the enemy from within.
I think the bigger problem are the people from within. We have some very bad people. We have some sick people, radical left lunatics. And I think they're and it should be very easily handled by, if necessary, by National Guard, or if really necessary, by the military.
Has many people, including Kamala Harris, sounding alarm bells about fascism. Trump.
Yeah, I mean, I would be very surprised if this video actually goes into the details about fascist philosophy and the doctrine of fascism and whatnot, and the history of pre-regime fascism. It's probably going to be a little bit more sort of pop than that. But because I just can't imagine, if you're really going into the weeds in fascism, I can't imagine actually coming out with the impression that Donald Trump is a genuine fascist. Like Michael Griffin, big fascist expert, you know, wrote a very popular book about fascism. He doesn't seem like a right-wing type to me, but he's straight up been like, these people who are called fascists are not actually fascists. It's a misnomer. And it's not like a dirty lie or anything, it's just a misnomer.
Even speaks positively about Hitler and is looking for generals with the same level of loyalty as he had. And so while I think comparing politicians and movements to Hitler and Nazis is a bit overblown generally, and I avoid doing it because it should be reserved for when the comparison is actually particularly apt, I think we have reached a point where the comparison is particularly apt.
It would make more sense to say that Trump is like Hitler than to say that Trump is a fascist, or to say that Trump is like Mussolini. He's actually quite a lot like Mussolini in a lot of ways, especially the megalomania. But like, saying fascist is saying something that you don't realize you're saying. And this is something that everyone gets wrong. They don't know what they're saying when they call someone a fascist. They think what they're saying is that this person is like Mussolini, when what they're actually saying is that this person is a part of this like ideology and philosophy that dates back to the late 1910s. You know, it doesn't really work. Or, you know, at least saying that they're part of a political movement that took place between the wars, you know? Like, at the bare minimum, you could say that he's a neo-fascist, or at the maximum, rather, at the bare maximum. Because that neo-fascist, the reason that word was coined is because fascism ended. You know, you had to kind of create a new word for that. But the thing that distinguishes neo-fascists is that they tend to be pretty honest about the fact that they're neo-fascists. What you could say is that maybe he's a crypto-neo-fascist, but by that point you're getting pretty far off the mark already, you know?
So today we're breaking down the fascist things Trump has said during his campaign and comparing that to Hitler. We all study the Holocaust in school and learn a lot about the aftermath of World War II, but taking a look at the years leading up to the war, the things Hitler said and the way he took power is, let's just say, instructive. And all the more reason to show up and vote this year for Kamala Harris, whether you like it or not, frankly. Let's get into it. First, let's just define fascism. This word gets thrown around a lot, so it's worth giving it a technical definition. According to Encyclopedia
A technical definition, okay.
Britannica, fascism is a political ideology and mass movement. Although fascist parties and movements differed...
Hold on, you skipped a lot. Fascism is a political ideology and mass movement that dominated many parts of Central, Southern, and Eastern Europe between 1919 and 1945. Between the wars, as I said, it's a movement that happened between the wars, historically. That's the broader fascism, as I interpret it. And that also had adherents in Western Europe, the United States, South Africa, Japan, Latin America, and the Middle East. Europe's first fascist leader, Benito Mussolini, took the name of his party from the Latin word fasces, which referred to a bundle of elm or birch rods, usually containing an axe, used as a symbol of penal authority in ancient Rome.
Significantly from one another, they had many characteristics in common, including extreme militaristic nationalism, contempt for electoral democracy and political and cultural liberalism, a belief in natural social hierarchy and the rule of elites, and the desire to create a people's community in which individual interests would be subordinated to the good of the nation.
Yeah, so here we have Britannica using the word Volksgemeinschaft. I believe that's how you pronounce it. Which is a feature of the sort of German nationalism that you don't find this word Volksgemeinschaft in fascism. Obviously, it's from a different language. So it's kind of what's going on here is we're getting this sort of approximation going on where the term as used in the German movement is sort of extrapolated. We can get the general meaning of what it meant in German, extrapolate that into something broader that we can apply to the entirety of this sort of international fascism, that we could call it. And so, a community in which the individual interests would be subordinated to the good of the nation. I think a much better way of talking about it would be to go back to the actual Italian. Talk about the totalitarian state, or the corporate state. But in any case, talk about the idea of the state as, everything within the state, nothing outside the state, nothing against the state. That, I think, is central to fascism specifically. This German thing, definitely, it's a very, very similar, if not the same idea. But I think we're running into the problem where we conclude that the Germans were fascists, and because of that we use their sort of verbiage and their ideology to kind of give us a general understanding of fascism, which I don't think is the right way to go about it. If for no other reason than they didn't call themselves fascists, and I didn't identify as fascists, whereas other people did. And so if some people did and some people didn't, and those people were not recognized as that thing by the people who did, it's just weird to me to then sort of use these people, the people who didn't, as your kind of chief kind of example and your standard by which to understand the phenomenon. But it's messy and it's muddled because of the way that fascism ended and wasn't allowed to continue. And because of that, it did not develop into really a thoroughly understood core concept. And so these Italian ideas that I'm talking about, to me, are what defines fascism. But I feel like what we're missing is like a real thorough international kind of understanding of the subject, because it was so abruptly cut short. And now it's kind of like up in the air, like what we're even talking about when we use this word. Should we all vote and ask for new candidates? Not vote and ask for new candidates, LMAO. No, I mean, what you should always do is just vote for whoever's best. Or, I guess, not necessarily. In a ranked choice system, you vote for whoever's best. In a erroneously called first past the post system, what you should do is vote for the candidate who is best of the viable choices. El Hombre says, nobody is here to listen to you be political. Shut the fuck up, you dumb fuck. Just shut the fuck up.
Fascist is seen as an insult and a dirty word today, and for good reason, but in its heyday it was proudly and openly embraced. Europe's first fascist leader was Benito Mussolini, whose National Fascist Party took power in 1922. Fascism spread throughout Europe in the years between the two world wars, largely as a backlash against the results of World War I. Virtually every European country had a fascist faction or party, and many countries saw those parties take power.
I mean, here's a question. Where do the Pashas fit into this? The guys who were in control of Turkey during World War I. Because they were nationalists. They were young Turks. And I see some similarity between them and the broader fascist movement. But they came long before fascism. In fact, their regime ended right around the time fascism started. So where do they fit in?
Power, including, of course, Italy and Germany. There were also fascist movements outside Europe, and I don't mean to be Eurocentric here, but this isn't a treatise on fascism, and I'm focusing on Hitler today, which requires talking mainly about...
Yeah, okay. So this video isn't about fascism, and it's clearly not making any attempt to understand fascism before talking about it, which is kind of the frustrating thing. But it's like, at this point, can you really expect anything more? I mean, there's nothing. It's like we've fallen so far down this hole that, like, to even try to get us out of this hole, I feel like I'm wasting my time.
Europe. Now, what makes a fascist? Unlike other political ideologies, fascism is unique because it doesn't have one clear theoretical framework, and instead it adapts to the specific cultural and historical conditions depending on where in the world it manifests. It is generally an amalgamation of a few key ideas. 1. Radical nationalism. In fascism, the ethnically and culturally homogenous core of the nation is the most valuable and central aspect of political life. We must do everything in our power to return to that historical homogeneity, whether real or imagined, as a means of protecting the nation from the threat of outsiders, both external and within our own borders. Number 2, populist authoritarianism. Fascism promotes the idolization and mythologization of charismatic central leaders, leaders who are seen as embodiments of the people's will and of the nation itself, which falls in line with...
I think with radical nationalism, though, there's also the element of wanting to renew the nation and uplift it into greater heights and empower it to do great things. Which is, you know, that is perhaps a more sort of positively framed trait that people aren't quite as interested in bringing up. I wonder why.
With fascism's belief in authoritarianism, wherein the leader is infallible and above the law. And number 3, anti-liberal and anti-democratic. Traditionally, fascism expresses its anti-liberal sentiments through a rejection of the liberal emphasis on individual rights and freedoms, and instead advocating for subordination of individualism in favor of the collective fight for the nation. Democratic processes are weak, bureaucratic, and inefficient. The will of the nation must be implemented through swift, decisive action by the idolized leader, who embodies the will of the nation anyway, so let him just do his thing. Unlike
That's actually a pretty accurate summation of that point.
traditional conservatism, which advocates for order and tradition, fascism brings a revolutionary fervor and populist rhetoric that alienates traditional conservatives as well as liberals. It is more radical, more movement-driven, and as I said,
more syncretic.
willing to fudge traditional political ideology in order to achieve the ultimate end goals of radical nationalism and populist authoritarianism. And a lot of the details of any particular fascist ideology differs depending on the specific location and moment in time when it manifests. Those details generally revolve around scapegoating and fear-mongering, capitalizing on whatever is most scary to the population and giving them a group towards which to target their anger. In Italy and Germany, the fascist parties capitalized on the anger and fear of war veterans, the middle class, and other segments of society who felt alienated and threatened by societal and economic change. And socialists, who were violent, godless revolutionaries intent on dissolving the traditional way of life, like the Bolsheviks in Russia, as well as Jews, who were allegedly involved in, the massive plot to control.
I mean, socialism does the same thing, only it's a different group of people. It's the industrial laborer, and in some cases the agricultural laborer, and I guess more these days the sort of service worker. But socialism definitely capitalizes on the fears and insecurities of those people too, just in a different way.
Banks in the world through an underground network, et cetera, et cetera. This trope has been around for a very long time. They were the chosen scapegoats, along with everyone else who didn't fit the mold of the imagined traditional cohesive identity of the nation. So in the case of Germany, that's the pseudoscientific Aryan race, a discredited concept that was invented in the 19th century by racist linguists, as well as a bastardization of social Darwinism, and then adopted by extremists in the 20th century to validate their violent ideologies. And no one adopted it quite as hard as Adolf Hitler. Through the idealization of the Aryan race, Hitler was able to capitalize on fears of economic instability and communism in the wake of World War I, and then direct those fears towards those who didn't.
The Pasha Triumvirate's ideology was something known as Ittihadism. Okay. Oh, my cursor's gone. I don't know how I'm ever going to fix this problem of my cursor just disappearing and reappearing.
Fit the mold. Got a problem? It was probably the Jews, or the communists, or the homosexuals who are predators, or the disabled who are useless eaters stealing your food and your resources. That was an actual talking point in Nazi propaganda. By playing into those fears and othering the people who do not fit the nationalist mold, fascists are able to create a strong identity, an us versus them mentality, which further solidifies that group dynamic. From this emerges what appears to be a safe haven for loyal members, where they will be protected, where there are clear answers for how to solve their problems, and where they can fight for their righteous national identity behind a strong leader that is above the law. Okay, now that we have the basics out of the way, let's examine how fascism manifested itself in Germany ahead of World War II, and I think you'll find this history very instructive. World War I led to the collapse of the German Empire and the creation of a new democratic republic. The new German government was forced to sign the Treaty of Versailles, which restricted Germany's ability to build an army or participate in any aggressive behavior, as well as requiring Germany to pay restitution and cede colonies and land. The reparations and restrictions after World War I tanked the German economy. In September 1923, $1 was worth 4 billion German marks. Soon after, the global economic collapse of 1929 led to deep unemployment, hunger, poverty, and homelessness in the early 1930s in Germany. This level of economic upheaval, combined with a sense that the world was unfairly attempting to suppress Germany and the German people, created a situation rife for backlash and movement building. Movements on both ends of the political spectrum were built, and many attempted to overthrow the new government. This also meant that the new government was...
Who is this person? Legia Miller? She has a lot of subscribers. I've never heard of her before. Oh man, I can't. Okay. Open link in new tab. Uh, uh, there we go. Yeah, my cursor's gone. Sorry, I can't see what I'm doing. So, anti-Elon Musk, anti-Jill Stein, I guess. Just general sort of political left-wing stuff. All right.
Deeply divided, making it nearly impossible to pass new laws, and many Germans lost faith in their leaders' ability to govern. Sound familiar? The Nazi Party was one of many new movements that grew out of this post-war.
Okay, let's look. I'm not a history buff, but doesn't it seem like in hard times humans tend to right, then in peaceful times left? We rise, then destroy ourselves. It's always in the name of money or religion. Damn, that paragraph was a mess. I need to stop drinking. Yeah, I don't agree with that. I think that people go toward a radical solution when the need for a radical change is witnessed. So they can see that something has gone disastrously wrong, and somebody needs to come in and change the country. But they have different perspectives on how this needs to happen. But yeah, they generally go for the man of action, someone who's promising a lot. And so the communists promise a lot. The fascists promised a lot. The German Nazis promised a lot. Donald Trump promises a lot. They go for people who seem to have really big solutions because they have very big problems. And so those big problems logically need big solutions. It's a very sensible approach, I think. The problem is that I think a lot of these people don't really have the answer. They sort of pretend to have the answer. Or maybe they have some good approaches, but they don't really have a way to make it sustainable and to make it work. And they have all these other ideas around the edges that aren't necessary and make things worse, actually, and destabilize the country even further. So with people with big heads and big ideas, they tend to go a little crazy, and they tend to not really know what they're doing, unfortunately. I do like the idea of the man of action and whatnot, but it just doesn't seem to end up all that well a lot of the time. I would say generally we tend towards extremity in times of hardship because we need change, and moderation is often hard to facilitate change through. Yeah, exactly. That's the big problem. That's why the fascists created their movement. Moderation just wasn't doing it for them. And a lot fought for change and power, then forget why they wanted it. Yeah, that happens too. That happened with Robert Mugabe. That happened with a lot of these guys who, this is kind of why we need term limits, I think. People just like keep getting elected over and over, but they keep getting worse and worse. But the more they get elected, the more they just entrench themselves in their position, and it's harder to get them out of power. And because of that, they just lose touch with what they were even doing in the first place. And they become either stupid or careless or frivolous or negligent or paranoid even.
World War I discontent. And Adolf Hitler, a young wounded World War I veteran, joined early in 1919. The group was impressed with his organization and oratory skills, and he became responsible for recruitment and propaganda, organizing larger party meetings and rallies where he would give speeches that made him indispensable to the party and its growth. In 1920, he developed the party's 25-point program, including pushing for an overhaul of the party structure that replaced the Democratic Committee with a single leader with ultimate control. When this
That's kind of what Donald Trump has done with the Republican Party. But he didn't need to make it official like that. All he needed to do was create a cult of personality around himself that distinguished himself not just from the other parties, not just from the Democrats, but from the other Republicans. So, therefore, every Republican who was against him was treated like Jeb Bush or Ted Cruz. They were part of the swamp, and he wanted to drain the swamp. So now everyone has to swear fealty to him, or they are rhinos, Republicans in name only. Donald Trump is the true manifestation of the Republican Party, and everyone must be loyal to him. Really ingenious move on his part, but very similar thing to what Hitler did.
Structuring was rejected, Hitler resigned. After the heads of the party realized that Hitler's speaking and organizing skills meant that without him, the party would flounder, they agreed to his demands and made Hitler the party chairman. In 1923, Hitler led a failed coup attempt that involved a march on the War Ministry building that resulted in violence. 14 Nazis died and 4 policemen were killed. Hitler was later arrested and spent less than a year in prison where he wrote Mein Kampf. After this failed coup, Hitler realized it would be more effective for him to take over Germany through electoral means by winning democratic support for his party and getting elected to power. So he got organized. He divided the country into regions, which each had a designated leader, then subsections of those regions, which each had a designated leader, and then even smaller sections inside those subsections, also with designated leaders, and each leader answered to the section leader above them, who ultimately answered to Hitler. Groups were also formed for doctors, lawyers, etc. to infiltrate existing social structures and help the party gain more members and supporters. Hitler also established a new leader for the SA.
Yeah, Hitler had to do it this way because there would have been a lot of insubordination if he didn't do it this way. But Trump doesn't even need this. That's what's so ingenious about Trump, is that he figured out a way where he can just ruin the political careers of all of the Republicans who oppose him. And because Republicans are so career-oriented and so just lacking in principles and so just avaricious and ghoulish, they're all just willing to get in line like a bunch of epsilons. It's wonderful.
The paramilitary arm of the Nazi Party. Initially, this paramilitary was a militia made up of ex-World War I soldiers and unemployed men who were disorderly and had free reign over their activities. To give this militia an air of legitimacy, Hitler appointed a strict leader to give the SA a more defined role. The SS was a small subdivision of the SA, originally meant to act as Hitler's bodyguards. The SS was significantly expanded in 1929 when Hitler put Heinrich Himmler in charge, who would lead the SS to police the entire Third Reich. These SS members were chosen based on their racial purity, blind obedience, and fanatical loyalty to Hitler. The more loyal you could prove yourself, the higher up the ranks you'd go. Sound familiar? As the military arms of the Nazi Party grew, so too did the propaganda wing. Joseph Goebbels used simple, effective communication through modern media like films and radio.
That is probably the best way to pronounce his name.
Tools like posters and
Goebbels. Because I've thought about, like, how do you pronounce that name in English? You could say Goebbels. That doesn't work. I know the Amazing Atheist says Goebbels. That, I don't like that. Goebbels, no. We don't have that that sound. They have it in Icelandic, so I've gotten pretty good at saying it. Goebbels. But yeah, Goebbels, I think, honestly, might be the best way to do it. Because there's an E, when you write it in English, there's an E in it. And it's kind of like, it reminds me of Oedipus, you know, O-E. Or Oedipus, as some people say. there's kind of a tradition of pronouncing things like that when you're taking them out of Greek and Latin.
Newspapers. The propaganda played into Germans' fears during uncertain and unstable times. These included instilling fear of unemployment in the working class, portrayals of ideals of family and the role of women as mothers, and scapegoating Jews and communists as a source of most of their economic and personal woes. Through this propaganda, Goebbels built an image of Hitler as the strong, stable leader Germany needed to become a great power again. Goebbels was so effective and loyal that he was appointed Minister of Propaganda in 1933. The economic unrest during the Great Depression led to numerous leadership turnovers at the head of the German government, and the success of Nazi propaganda in obtaining popular support for Hitler and the Nazi movement was evident in the growing success in the elections. In 1928, the Nazi Party won just 2.6% of the vote, getting just 12 seats in the German parliament. 2 years later, in 1930, they won 18%, and 2 years after that, in 1932, Hitler ran for president, losing, but with 36.8% of the vote.
That's an extreme rise in popularity. Fascinating. And I mean, I think a lot of it has to do with just that badass swastika symbol that they created. I mean, it's just so striking, and it makes everyone's heads turn and go, whoa, what are these people up to? I want to know about these guys. They seem interesting. So, I mean, he was so great at marketing, I think.
From leader of a radical paramilitary organization in the early 1920s to credible politician in the early 1930s. The 1932 parliamentary election gave Nazis 230 seats, with 37% of the vote, becoming the largest party in the German parliament, just 4 years after only winning 2.6%. Hitler, as leader of the largest party in parliament,
Hugo
was
Boss
named
uniforms.
Chancellor of Germany, sworn in on January 30th, 1933.
And the mustache. We can't underrate the mustache. There's something about the mustache that makes him Hitler. He wouldn't be Hitler without it. And he had this, even though people made fun of him for the mustache, he was smart not to change it, because he just knew that this looked badass. Even if people mock me for it, they're all going to be wanting to wear one in 15 years. Of course, he got that wrong because he didn't realize how much of a pariah he would become. He thought that he would win. But it's just that he, that perfectly straight, just up and down, square look accentuated the anger in his features in a way that made him look really potent and powerful, and a little bit like evil and sinister, in a way that I think didn't turn people off, but it appealed to them. It felt like, whoa, this is like like dark MAGA, it's edgy, it's edgy and cool, and I'm into it. Because they were feeling edgy at the time. I mean, they were just angry at the time, and they wanted to punk out and be like little punk Nazis. And that was kind of their, who they naturally sort of glommed around. The guy who was acting like a badass punk, with his crazy look that just worked. It had this sternness, this iron Prussian chancellor thing about it that made it feel so rooted in the culture. And it's just, it's become iconic for a reason.
President dwindled in 1932. Remember, he lost with 36% of the vote. A group of conservative elites, members of the ruling class and new industrialist business class, met secretly to back Hitler as chancellor. Among the group were political leaders and the son of the current president, along with important wealthy industrialists. Their support was vital to Hitler eventually being named chancellor by Germany's president. The idea being that they needed a strong authoritarian power in place to protect their power and money, and they saw their opportunity in Hitler. Sound familiar? But at this point, the Nazis were just one party in a three-party coalition government alongside a non-Nazi president. In an attempt to consolidate more power, Hitler called for another election in 1933 and went on a propaganda blitz to try to win as many more parliamentary seats as possible. But then in February 1933, the German parliament building was suddenly set ablaze, burning to the ground and instilling panic in the public over the potential terror attack. A young Dutch communist was arrested for the crime, playing into the Nazi party's scapegoating of communists
That dude
and
looks like a
amplifying their
modern
fear-mongering
kid.
propaganda. 4,000 communists were subsequently imprisoned as a result.
He
The
looks
day
like
after
a
the fire, the
college
president
kid.
of Germany signed the emergency decree for the protection of the German people. Through this presidential decree, Hitler got emergency powers. The decree suspended basic personal freedoms like the freedom of speech, the right to own property, and the right to trial before imprisonment. This gave Nazis a legal and legitimized basis to persecute and oppress opponents as traitors to the Republic, because people could be imprisoned for no reason. The Communist Party and its democratically elected parliament members were banned from parliament. The elections went forward as planned. In March, now under the fear of potential political persecution, many people feared for their safety in casting their ballots. The Nazi Party won 43% of the vote, an increase of nearly 10% over the election held just 6 months before.
Yeah.
2 weeks after the
The perception of being counterculture was certainly a draw. I think it was. I mean, I think edgelords are a factor that you can't discount. I think that there was a lot of just edgelords at the time, and that was how you became an edgelord. That was how you were an edgelord back then. You know, you would be a Nazi basically. And I think these days a lot of those same people are Trump supporters for the same reason.
the election, Hitler proposed a law to Parliament that would give him the power to rule by decree, meaning he could just issue a decree and it would become law, as opposed to proposing laws to Parliament for approval. The terror and fear that was still very palpable after the attack on Parliament 1 month before, combined with the support of political elites, gave Hitler's otherwise bat-crazy proposal that air of legitimacy it needed. Hitler won over the centrist party by promising to protect the interests of the Catholic Church, and with the communist parliament members banned from attending and the newly and illegitimately elected Nazi members of parliament, Hitler was able to get the parliament to pass his enabling law 444 to 94. Again, lending an air of legitimacy to what was an absolutely anti-democratic power grab. That same month, March 1933, the Nazis opened Dachau, their first concentration camp, to house and murder their political opponents. In the years that followed, Hitler continued his work to appear moderate while slowly taking
according
over.
to him, the first American who ever set foot in Dachau was Robert Sherman, the brother of Richard Sherman and writer of such songs as Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, A Spoonful of Sugar, Chim Chim Cheree. Interesting.
Through nominally democratic means, lending to the illusion of stability and democracy. Tension between the SA, remember that
personally, I think it comes from people seeing edginess as a form of confidence and charisma, which, to be fair, it kind of is. Yeah, it is, and it's definitely cool. It's definitely awesome. But, you know, it's not, you shouldn't vote for it, unfortunately. Like, it's just not, people get tricked into thinking, well, this is, we can believe in this and trust it with our safety in our country. And unfortunately, you just can't. It's not how it works. You visited Dachau? There you go. You were in the same place as Robert Sherman.
military group, and Nazi leadership grew as the SA wanted to engage in more overt revolutionary activities, and Hitler had Himmler and others in his ear, making him fearful of a potential SA coup. This led to the Night of the Long Knives in June 1934, in which most of the SA leadership, as well as other political opponents, were arrested and murdered without trial. Goebbels, the propaganda leader of the party, created media coverage that presented the attack as a preventative measure in response to a...
Those other political opponents included the Strasser brothers, who were notably the left-wing faction of their party, as most fascist parties back then had a left, which is something that a lot of people don't bring up, but it's interesting.
planned coup on the government. Since the SA were seen by the public as being unruly and violent, many saw the attack.
And usually the left was suppressed by the right. That's usually how it went, unfortunately.
As a legitimate move by the government to ensure public order. And in July, the parliament retrospectively passed a bill legalizing the purge as an emergency defense measure. Again, more legal legitimacy. Outside of the military, from 1933 to 1934, the Nazi Party systematically took control of all aspects of Germany, all through what were considered legal and democratic means because of Hitler's decree powers given to him democratically.
Yeah, Strasserism is a very fascinating topic. Unfortunately, I haven't had the liberty to read too much about it yet because I'm not focusing on that area of study right now. But yeah, and you find parallels in other places too. This sort of the left wing of the supposedly far right group can often be very far left because these terms left and right don't actually mean anything, and it's kind of a little verbal trap that people get themselves in when they try to conceptualize these things.
By Parliament. He issued the Act for the Restoration of the Professional Civil Service.
You ever put Hollywood on when you get sad at the world, or is it just me? No, I don't. I don't really listen to sad music when I'm sad. I don't do that. I have in the past listened to Antichrist Superstar when I was angry. I've done that. In fact, I kind of did that on my way home coming into Reno recently from my trip. I was really just burnt out and needed to express that. And so I listened on a dark desert highway. I listened to all of Antichrist Superstar and all of Portrait of an American Family, but really Antichrist Superstar was the main important one. I listened to it all with the music blaring in the speakers, and it was like the most ideal way to listen to that album because you're in this dark environment, you're going somewhere, you're hypnotized by the road, and you're just letting the album just fill your ears with sound in a way that you can't really do as well with earbuds. And like I don't have like a big speaker sound system to use, and even if I did, I would probably irritate other people in my house. So really I've never had an opportunity to really listen to Antichrist Superstar, to really just have the ideal listening experience until then. Nah, I do that too, Tonyo. Especially the Nobodies and the Death Song. Mark, the Nobodies be hitting dark. No better place than in an open, desolate desert. At night, too. Yeah, Antichrist Superstar with the AC max while driving in the dark is peak. Yeah.
Removing anyone of non-Aryan descent from civil service, including the removal of any judges that were deemed non-compliant with Nazi law or principles. The Nazis replaced the Supreme Court with the People's Court, on which sat judges chosen specifically for their Nazi beliefs. Goebbels was put in charge of controlling the national media, arts, and culture, ensuring they all advocated for Nazi ideas. Then, in August 1934, the president of Germany, the final check on Hitler's power, died. Shortly after, Hitler announced that the offices of the Chancellor and the President would be combined to create one consolidated leader, and that Hitler himself would occupy the role. To once again lend an air of democratic legitimacy to this proclamation, a vote was held for German people to decide whether or not they approved of the merging of the offices and Hitler's new role as Führer. According to official reports, 95% of the population voted, and 90% voted in favor of Hitler. A reminder that there was a lot of political persecution and threats happening at this time.
That's a lot of people, though. That's a huge number of fucking voters. 95% of the population? Holy shit. And that many of them voted for Hitler? I mean, yeah, sure, threats and persecution, blah, blah, blah. But, like, that's a lot of popular support. And, I mean, I guess I can see at the time why, like, if you're not woke, like back then people weren't woke the way they are today, and they just didn't understand the consequences of the things that they were hearing in the newspapers and on the radio. And, you know, they just thought, well, you know, the Jews, yeah, they're probably not great. I mean, they're kind of weird looking. They don't really vibe with us. They're not Christian. Yeah, there's probably something up with them. And yeah, homosexuality, that's gross. I don't like that. So yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, people probably shouldn't be like doing all this degenerate stuff. Yeah, probably should clean up our act. We should probably get ourselves, you know, together in good kind of military order. Like, there's a way you can kind of fall into that thinking when it's like, yeah, it kind of makes common sense. Back then, back when they didn't have really the context for understanding why that was so bad, it wasn't like everyone was evil. It was more just like people were just like, well, yeah, we should get ourselves in shape, you know. It's a new changing world. We've got obstacles to face. We got a really bad economic situation. Here's a guy who's giving us answers and saying that we need to shape up and discipline ourselves. And, you know, by golly, my grandfather would tell me the same thing. I mean, this is the same shit they've been told their whole lives, you know. And then someone comes on, he's like grandpa for the whole country. It's like, okay, maybe we should get our act together. It makes sense to me why people turn to this. These days, I think people have a much harder time understanding it because they lack the perspective of a pre-woke world. And I think it's great that we went woke, but I just think that it helps if you understand what it was like before people were woke. And if you weren't one of these degenerates who was an outcast, you didn't have the perspective to understand what that was like. Some people did. Some people were really empathetic and could see beyond their own lives. But it was just a different time, I think. And a different culture, different country, you know. I think we're used to the American or British sort of Anglo way. We have a lot of comments here. Just desperate and mislead people. I think that's why they voted. There was a lot of taking things at face value at the time. Yeah, I think so. Like, people weren't postmodern the way they are now. People weren't, like, paranoid conspiracy theorists back then the way they are now. They were, like, anti-Semitic conspiracy theorists, but it wasn't the same kind of thing. It was more like a superstition back then, whereas these days it's not really the same kind of superstition. It's not like the demon, ghost, God and angels superstition they used to have. It's another weird kind of thing where there's this sort of narrative of populism and anti-establishment ideas, and like, oh, I figured it out because I'm so smart. It wasn't like that. It was more like people just accepted the reality with which they were presented, which is very sheeple and very much kind of against what the modern kind of paranoid people think about. The edginess factor is huge. Add that to the victim mentality, which is another huge factor, and you basically got a 95% vote. It's very hard to get both, but when you've got it, you've got it. I saw a political commentator say recently that the basic political tendency of socially conservative, fiscally liberal was driving the zeitgeist in the interwar period and also now. Certainly back then, people were fiscally liberal and socially conservative a lot of the time. And by liberal, I think we're talking about like American modern liberalism. I think that's what you're saying. Definitely, like, that was a huge kind of strain in thought that had a lot of mainstream appeal back then in a way that we don't really think about these days, but it's really important to understand. And that's why I brought it up in my first video about fascism, with the whole Charles Coughlin thing and how popular he was among the American Nazis. Dizzy's, you're fading me. Come on, done. I will leave you inside. You were mine, Rev Manson. Those are not the lyrics. Naivete ruled the day. Yeah, very interesting and, like, I think underappreciated aspect of the whole dynamic. Because people are so baffled and bamboozled by why so many people were cool with Hitler back then. But I think you just got to put yourself in their shoes. Think about the culture that they were raised in, the schools that they went to, the Prussian militarist schools that they went to. It makes sense that they would kind of feel that way. That rhymes. Naivete ruled the day. Is that what you're talking about? Okay.
By the end of 1934, the Nazis managed to take over every major aspect of German government and place Hitler at the top with zero checks to his power, all using ostensibly democratic means. From there, Germany exhibited increasingly antagonistic behavior internationally, leading to the annexation in 1938 of Austria and of the northern part of Czechoslovakia that the Germans lost after World War I, and finally the invasion of Poland in 1939, which started World War II. There's obviously so much more to this story, but this brief history highlights especially the means that Hitler used to gain power within Germany, with the air of legitimacy so strong that to this day, some people still say that the people elected Hitler, which, as we've learned...
I guess the point I was making, really, is that a lot of the people, I think, were not, like, malicious and mean-spirited and nasty so much as they were just kind of like, yeah, okay, yeah, these people probably aren't very great, and we could probably do without them, and yeah, we should probably get our act together. It's sort of people, I think there was a kind of nonchalance about a lot of the kind of Hitler support, as much as there was the sort of radical, head over heels sort of passion from other people. I think it took all kinds.
Isn't entirely true. And so all of this begs the question, is Trump a fascist? Well, I hope based on all of the information I've just shared, it's a pretty clear and resounding yes from you. But let me just connect the dots so it's extra above.
Well, I mean, yeah, you have to connect the dots first. You can't, like, assume that we're all gonna see what you see. That we all have the context of understanding Trump the way you do.
Abundantly clear. Let's take the core aspects of fascism in turn. 1. Radical nationalism. Check. Trump's Make America Great Again slogan.
Interesting fact about the Austrians, there has been an effort to establish the Austrians as a different ethnicity than the Germans so as to distance themselves from the Nazi pan-Germanist ideology. Yeah, I don't think that's necessary. Because, I mean, Austrian, I mean, it's not a linguistic phenomenon. There is an Austrian dialect of German, but there are also Austrians who speak a dialect that's more similar to Bavarian, which is like Hitler. Hitler was from a part of Austria where the way they talked was a little bit more like Bavaria than Vienna, a little bit more like Nuremberg than Vienna, or not Nuremberg. What was the capital of Bavaria? I can't remember. Munich. A little bit more like Munich than Vienna. And so it's like, what this, it feels like such a obvious political ploy to try to create this sort of a fucking Austrian ethnicity. No, it's not an ethnicity, it's a nationality. It was always a political difference. It was the Habsburg territories versus the Hohenzollern. And well, I guess they weren't really the Hohenzollern territories. They were an empire united under Hohenzollern leadership. But a lot of that territory was Hohenzollern territory. Wasn't Hitler an Austrian with identity problems? No, he was an Austrian who, he didn't really, I mean, identity problems. What do you mean by that? I mean, what do you mean? He was an Austrian. There's also the Tyroleans. Yeah, the Tyroleans. They're a different type, you know. There's different ethnicities of within the German population of Austria. So creating, like, the idea of creating an Austrian ethnicity makes no sense. It's a nationality. It definitely is, no denying it. Yeah.
Imagines a made-up past as a vision for a utopian future, and central to that is a shared American identity. What that identity is depends on which group you're asking, but generally that's going to be white, Christian, heterosexual family units. This is made clear by the work Trump and his followers do to attack anyone who doesn't follow that mold. Immigrants, Muslims, trans folks, black single mothers, anyone who doesn't fit the mold is open for ridicule, with the end goal being a return.
Yeah, Trump is definitely very nationalist in a very exclusionary way. So in this way, he fits the bill pretty well. He also has the Make America Great Again thing, the idea of needing to revive national greatness. Also fits the bill pretty well. And definitely, like, exclusionary of immigrants, exclusionary of Muslims, but up to a point. And I think the point is he is pretty much okay with anyone who likes him. And I don't think you could say that about Hitler. I think if you had a bunch of Jews saying Jews for Hitler, he would probably think that's bad PR for him. Whereas I don't know if Trump feels that way. I think for Trump, any amount of support is good support. Doesn't matter where it's coming from. Unless it's from someone like David Duke. So in that way, he actually distances himself from the so-called far right, the sort of racist camp. Because, you know, he at first was kind of like, okay, David Duke, like, do I want to necessarily say that I don't want his support? Like, any support is good support. So I think in that way, it sort of, for him, like, he didn't think that made sense to try to say you denounce or renounce somebody's support. It's like, well, if someone's supporting me, they're supporting me. It doesn't matter what they believe in. And I think that's Trump's general philosophy on it. I don't think he's really identitarian. I think he's a megalomaniac. And so anyone who loves him, he's cool with. But then when David Duke brought too much heat on him, he finally actually did have to renounce David Duke. Even though it just wasn't what he wanted to do. And I don't think it wasn't what he wanted to do because he's secretly a KKK-loving Klansman. I think it's because he's a megalomaniac who, you know, reasonably and rightly, I think, has the mentality of being like, well, who cares what he believes? If he supports me, then he's, you know, advantageous to me. Which I think is a totally reasonable way to look at the situation. So, generally, I think, yeah, you can say that, yeah, Trump is hyper-nationalist, and in that sense he resembles Hitler. But there are also differences. There are also key ways in which he doesn't resemble Hitler, I think. Claudia Burdella is here. Hello.
return to this imagined shared identity. Number 2, populist authoritarianism. Check. When asked, Trump's followers, at least the ones who make it in the clips from rallies, indicate a willingness to completely ignore his words and actions, to completely accept his felony record because he is infallible, he is above the law, he is godlike, and he is not to be questioned. They don't care.
There's a classic cartoon that shows other convicted felons. There's Gandhi, there's Nelson Mandela, and then there's Trump.
Despite his nonsensical ramblings and inability to...
But I don't think that Gandhi or Nelson Mandela were felons because they were doing white-collar crime and corruption. I don't think that's the reason they were felons. I think they were felons because they were inciting people to rebel against the government. I think that's a very different thing. Now, Trump did that as well. And so in that sense, you can draw the comparison. It still wouldn't be, I think, a very good comparison for other reasons, but in just the purely logical sense, you could draw that comparison. But I don't think most of Trump's felony charges are over the January 6th incident. I think it's much more stuff, other kind of bullshit that he's involved in, shady dealings and stuff.
To talk in full sentences, Trump has a charm to him that allows him to win people over and make them feel like he's one of them, despite embodying zero of the same qualities of most of his followers. Project 2025 and Trump himself would have him at the helm of a government stripped of checks and balances, stripped of regulations and government agencies, and stripped of any civil servant who hasn't professed a loyalty to Trump himself. Number 3.
Populist authoritarianism. In this sense, I think she's totally on point. Totally on the money. This first one, radical nationalism, she's kind of on point. She has good comparisons. There are good comparisons to make. There are also contrasts to make. This second one, populist authoritarianism, is Trump to a T. That's Trump. Next.
3, anti-liberal. Check. Trump's flavor of anti-liberalism is an example of how fascism is able to adapt depending on where and when it's manifesting. This is America. An outward declaration that people should give up individual freedoms for the good of the collective is a hard sell in the most individualistic country in the world. So anti-liberalism instead manifests itself a bit more discreetly. Yes, we care about freedom of speech, but only the speech of the right people. Yes, we care about freedom of the press, but we sow doubt in the mainstream media and any media that isn't loyal to Trump wherever possible. Yes, we believe in freedom of religion, but only for Christians. Most individualistic country in the world. So
I was distracted by my own
This is
thoughts.
America. An outward declaration that people should give up individual freedoms for the good of the collective is a hard sell in the most individualistic country in the world. So anti-liberalism instead manifests itself a bit more discreetly. Yes, we care about freedom of speech, but only the speech of the right people. Yes, we care about freedom of the press, but we sow doubt.
Exactly. It's utterly hypocritical faux liberalism is what it is. And this is what I talked about in my video about why I admire fascism. That an ideology that's so brazenly authoritarian and collectivist is so anathema to the modern zeitgeist, even though so many of us have those impulses within us. And I brought up the example of the flag waving, gun toting, just totally pro-military, seemingly, they would seemingly be pro-state conservatives, but they're not. They have this anti-state rhetoric. It's fascinating how sort of brain broken people have become, convincing themselves that they're libertarians when they're really authoritarians. It's so fascinating, isn't it? Another commentator I read described the MAGA movement and Trump's personal beliefs as American Peronism. Perón was Argentina, right? I don't know much about him. I think he was a neoliberal, kind of like Pinochet, right? How does belief in freedom of the press conflict with not believing most press? See, that's what struck me. That's why I had to rewind. I was like, wait a minute, what did she just say? So let me play that back.
Out in the mainstream media and any media that isn't loyal to Trump, wherever, more discreetly. Yes, we care about freedom of speech, but only the speech of the right people.
Okay.
Yes, we care about freedom of the press, but we sow doubt in the mainstream media and any media that isn't loyal to Trump.
Yeah, see, this is a bullshit point. This is like a totally nonsensical dog water point. Like, why the fuck did she say this? Supporting the freedom of the press has nothing to do with sowing doubt in the mainstream media. That's a total non sequitur. So you're right about that, Mark. Love ya, says Gregory Coleman. It's so polarized, she's wrong there. It's so polarized, she's wrong there. What are you saying, Claudia? What are you saying, Claudia? I don't know.
Wherever possible. Yes, we believe.
By the way, this show, I've been watching this show lately. This show is fucking
just
awesome.
Concentrate on the good and all will be well. You're not just painting me, you know. You're painting the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland and every...
Guys, this show is hella good. It has John Lithgow playing Winston Churchill on Netflix. It's been around for a long time, and I've wanted to watch it kind of for a long time, but I've never gotten around to it until now. It's hella fucking awesome. If you're into, like, British political drama, which I am totally obsessed with, like, British politics for some reason is something that I am just in love with, this is a show for you. Anyway, back to this.
Even freedom of religion, but only for Christians. Individual freedoms in Trump's fascism all come.
Well, there is a conflict between freedom of religion and freedom from religion, which is an interesting French Jacobin innovation that I kind of like. The French liberal tradition says it's not that we have the freedom to practice any religion we want to, it's that you have the freedom to not be harassed by religious authorities, because they had a very anti-clerical, skeptical of the second estate mentality among the French liberals, and it's kind of a cool idea. But yeah, definitely that's more of the kind of liberal view. In America, the conservative view is that you don't have freedom from religion, you only have freedom of religion, which is freedom to practice religion in whatever way you want. And that's, I think, more along the lines of what a lot of the founding fathers believed. Not Thomas Jefferson, though. Thomas Jefferson was not a Christian, and so he was very skeptical of religion, although he did believe in God.
With a caveat that render them applicable only to the group of people who fit into the
We have what I was saying is about the love ya comment. Huh? What are you talking about? Okay. I watched this documentary about Deep Throat. It was pretty good. John Waters is in it, of course, and then randomly, of all people, Bill Maher. Oh my god. That fucking perv, of course he'd be in it. Yeah, Deep Throat is... I mean, isn't that just, like, an Andy Warhol thing? Isn't that like an Andy Warhol... Or am I mixing it up with something? Isn't that a movie by Andy Warhol? The beautiful meatball, the beautiful meatball. See, that works, but I kind of prefer the beautiful pizza, the beautiful pizza. It's all relative to the cut of your meatza. See, I can't remember the rest of the lyrics to that. I had lyrics to that years ago, but I can't remember. Warhol had nothing to do with it. Then what is it? Deep Throat. was the whistleblower in Watergate. Okay. Interesting name for a whistleblower. Deep Throat. See, why the fuck was John Waters in it then? That's the thing, is it's not adding up. If this was about a Watergate thing, then why is John Waters in it? By the way, John Waters was in the recent episode of Hell of a Boss, which I am going to upload my review of it tomorrow. Very good episode. It's the name of a famous porno from 1972 as well. Okay. So that makes more sense. It's nothing to do with Watergate. Okay. You guys answered my questions. Okay. Let's move on.
Aforementioned made-up traditional identity of the nation. And number 4, anti-democratic, also check. You hear it in the dog whistles that have been adopted by his followers. We're not a democracy, we're a republic. You see it in Project 2025 and in Trump's own professed plans. Fire civil servants who aren't loyal, replace judges to the group of people who fit into the aforementioned made-up traditional identity of the nation. And
made-up traditional identity of the nation, okay.
Number 4.
That's a very vitriolic way to say it.
Anti-democratic, also check. You hear...
So anti-liberal, we got that. I mean, they position themselves as against liberalism, but liberalism means something a little bit different in America. They're faux liberals. They're faux libertarians. It's challenging to really categorize them as anti-liberal because they really aren't in rhetoric, in a lot of ways. So I can't really go full on check with this. It's another half check. It's like the first one. It's another half check. It's close, but not quite all the way. Anti-democratic, let's hear
it in the dog whistles that have been adopted by his followers. We're not a democracy, we're a republic. You see...
That's just true, depending on how you view it. I mean, this is such a, shit lib perspective on this. Like, if you question the democratic nature of our country, then you're automatically a fascist. What? I mean, it's simply true that people don't have direct democratic control over their country. They're a republic. They elect representatives to decide things, and magistrates to decide things, and judges to decide things. We're not a direct democracy, or even a delegate democracy.
See it in Project 2025 and in Trump's own professed plans. Fire civil servants who aren't loyal, replace judges with loyalists, get rid of the administrative state in favor of a concentration of power in the hands of the president who can act swiftly and decisively without the inconvenience of regulations unchecked by other branches or by the will of the people. And when Trump says he wants generals as loyal to him as Hitler had, that is coming from a place of having studied how Hitler did what he did. Studied may be too strong of a word, as I'm not convinced Trump can read words really good, but...
I mean, I think it just means he was impressed by the Blitzkrieg and thought that that was a really cool maneuver, and thought that it is quite impressive how talented the military command was in Germany, that they managed to hold their own when they were one country sandwiched between a bunch of hostile countries, and they managed to survive for a pretty long time.
He surrounds himself with people who can. Like Hitler, Trump has capitalized on the fears of his base: astronomical economic inequality, racial animosity, changing societal norms. Like Hitler, Trump has chosen a handful of scapegoats that can be blamed for everything without needing any actual evidence to back it up. Can't find housing? Immigrants took it. Can't find a job? Immigrants took it. Feeling unsafe? Probably the immigrants, or the blacks, or the black immigrants.
We're kind of getting off the point. We're kind of going back to earlier points. because this is supposed to be about anti-democratic, and we're not really talking about Trump being anti-democratic here exactly.
They're eating the pets of the people that live there.
Like Hitler, Trump and his cronies have infiltrated every aspect of public life in order to take control or discredit it. Trump alone didn't do this, but his supporters have been working for decades to lay the groundwork. For example, the Kochs and their network have funded academic institutions to push questionable free market ideology. They have funded think tanks to push articles and policy around those ideologies, including the Heritage Foundation, creator of Project 2020.
Yeah, and fascism is not a free market system. Fascism wants the market to be subordinated to the state. That's part of the totalitarian doctrine. So that's unwittingly a way in which Trump differs from fascism. But she's not going to bring that up because I don't think she's really done a holistic analysis of the fascist phenomenon and is really objectively talking about it. This is just, it's more of just a way to associate Trump with this bad thing. It's enough to just describe how Trump is bad. I don't think we need to make these sort of conflations. We can make associations, like make a video saying Trump is like a fascist. That's a totally reasonable thing to do. Like, I would have no problem with that video. I just have a problem with framing it as, yes, Trump is a fascist, as if the people like me who say Trump is not a fascist are somehow wrong, even though I've actually studied fascism pretty closely, and I have a lot of points that you didn't bring up, you didn't address about why Trump isn't a fascist.
25, they have funded lobbyists to then bring those policies to the
just feels like she wants to shove Trump bad every chance she gets. It's true, but it kind of messes with her point to be jumping around so much about why he's bad. Yeah, a little bit. She could use it with a little bit of focus here. Literally gets disproven with the conception of a corporate state from the doctrine of fascism. This person glazes over it like tick history does. Yeah, it's kind of the inverse of tick history, where tick history is sort of glazes over it in one direction, and she glazes over it in the opposite direction. Pro-negative rights for social and economic conservatives. Yeah.
The politicians, and they have funded the re-election campaigns of those same politicians. Trump and his cronies have pushed propaganda to discredit academics and experts as brainwashed liberals, as communists. They've pushed propaganda to discredit reputable news media as filled with those.
And that's really the thing that I have a problem with this title. Yes, Trump is a fascist. It's the wrong way to approach this topic. Because, like I said, it's implying that I am wrong for saying he's not a fascist. And I'm not wrong. I'm sorry. I'm just objectively not wrong. Okay.
Same brainwashed liberals and communists. Trump has led his followers to believe that their way of life, their beliefs, their livelihood, and their safety is being persecuted by a dangerous, growing tide of leftists and communists who would have their children turn trans and pee in litter boxes, give their jobs to immigrants, get rid of all measures of public safety, and suppress their First and Second Amendment rights. Conveniently, danger is closing in from all sides, and the perpetrators are the very people who don't fall in line for Trump. And all of this is cloaked under a false sense of legitimacy because he was elected fair and square once. Fair and square, however, is arguable because he lost the popular vote and voter suppression is very real, but technically he won. And now that he's held power legitimately once, he's willing to use whatever tools necessary while attempting to appear moderate and to be operating within the confines of the law, just like Hitler did, to maintain and consolidate that
Too
power.
declarative, assumes their position is
self-evident. He's managed to convince his followers that it's in their best
Umberto Eco has made a serious negative impact on how we talk about fascism, in my opinion. Yeah, I kind of agree with that. And I don't mean to dog on the guy too much because he actually was indoctrinated into fascism as a child. Maybe not so successfully, but I mean, he grew up in fascist Italy. He went to those schools. So like, I don't want to like tell the guy that he's wrong. You know, it's like, it's condescending to tell someone who actually lived it that he's wrong about fascism. And I don't think he is really wrong about fascism. He got some things wrong. Like Tick History actually brought it up. It was a good point that Tick History made. One of the few good points that Tick History has made. Umberto Eco was wrong about Julius Evola. He just didn't really understand Julius Evola's relationship to fascism. And he used that to misrepresent fascism. It's true. He wasn't always right about everything. But, you know, Vosh just takes Umberto Eco's fascism 14 points as if it's like a definition of fascism. And I don't even think I think it's even unfair to Eco to say that that's what he was doing with that essay, because I read that essay a couple times and I don't think that's not the impression I came out with. I actually more came to with the impression that Eco was trying to extrapolate the problems with fascism to a much broader movement of this sort of new right-wing populist bullshit that is perennially expressing itself in every culture, in every time period. That started in the 20th century, that there wasn't really a thing like that before then, because before then, right-wing politics was all about establishment politics, basically. But this was like a weird new kind of thing where it's like anti-establishment and right-wing. It kind of defies our sort of common assumptions up to that point. And I think Eco was noticing that, and he was tying all that back to his experiences as a child. He was like, this is basically like fascism. This is basically like the stuff that I knew and was taught as a child. And so I think that's what he was doing. I don't think when he said fascism, like the word he put in there for a reason. It's because he wasn't talking about fascism. He was talking about right-wing populism in general, which is something that other people don't get. And I think they misread that essay. And I think Vosh is misreading it. But then again, I've only really read that essay from Eco. So that's all I really know about him. So maybe there's other stuff that he's written that puts wrinkles in my perception of it, but just from reading that essay, it doesn't seem like people are coming away with it with the right impression. Claudia Burdella says Umberto Eco is meh. Also says she's too self-righteous to take seriously. It's not trying to define fascism, it's trying to deconstruct the right-wing presences and stuff. Exactly. Yeah. That was my impression of it with fascism. I think Vosh totally got the wrong impression from it. Vosh takes that and is like, this is like the definitive list of 14 ways to identify fascism. And I don't even think that's what Eco was trying to do. I think Eco was trying to actually extrapolate his experience of fascism to other things that he was seeing, which is why he used the word fascism instead of just fascism. Anyway.
Interest to elect him when it's not. All the while, he's backed by today's version of wealthy industrialists who believe that with him in the White House, their money and power will go untouched and unchallenged. And on the similarities go. Trump is a fascist. If he wins next week, there will be far fewer checks on his power than there were the first time, thanks to the damage he did during his first administration. It is only through a decisive victory that we can hopefully definitively shut down Trump's power, as well as his challenges to the election results after the fact. But hope is not lost. You do not need a time machine to go back and kill Hitler. You can do your part now to vote against fascism in our own era. Go to iwillvote.com to check your registration and set up a voting plan. If you haven't voted already, do you have a plan to vote? Comment it below. It helps to...
Yeah, a lot of people don't vote, and I just think that's sad, because I think it shows that people just have so much apathy, even when so much shit is going down, and people's input matters. People just don't care enough to actually put their opinion in. And that's just yeah, it's upsetting. But the good thing, I guess, is that with every election cycle, we get a greater voter turnout. So that's at least something good. So that's the end of that video. Vosh took it as a decalogue. I can't remember what the meaning of decalogue is. Trump is not a fascist. An immigrated billionaire very much conflicts with the conception of a corporate state, LMFAO. Well, Trump is a native citizen. He was born in Queens, I think. So he's not an immigrant. And the people he's descended from are Germans of the same stock as a lot of the white people in this country, so I don't think that there's any issue there either. But the billionaire aspect, I mean, billionaires are not, like, the corporate state is not against billionaires, I don't think. He just thinks that billionaires shouldn't be in control of the country in this sort of what Mosley called financial democracy. I was talking about Elon Musk because she mentioned billionaires backing him. Oh, okay. You're talking about Elon Musk. Okay, that's a totally different subject, yeah. Yeah, I guess he's backed by the international moneyed elites, although Elon Musk, even though his money originally comes from South Africa, I think most of the investments he's made have been in American businesses, like Tesla. Decalogue equals another name for the Ten Commandments. Oh, okay. All right. So there's one other video that I was curious about. 17 minutes, not too long.
I don't think it goes without saying.
So it had angel dust from Has Been Hotel in the thumbnail, and it's called "How Not to Write a Victim of Abuse," which, again, this is just another title and thumbnail that immediately pisses me off just seeing it, because it's sort of implying that this ideology that I really hate in media analysis, which is this sort of ideology that says that representation is what matters. And so, like, if you put, like, for instance, if you put a black person in a movie, then that black person is not just a character, he is black representation. And therefore, whatever he does, whatever his personality is, reflects somehow on how the movie views black people. That, I think, is a horrible way to analyze media. And this idea of how not to write a victim, like there is like one correct way to write a victim of abuse. Like you can't just write a character who happens to be a victim of abuse, and there's a bunch of other things that make up his quirky personality. It's like there's some way you're supposed to do it because it's meant to be representative of victims of abuse as a category. Now, that's just my initial impression of this video from the title and the thumbnail. That's it. Like always, I'm going into this video with an open mind. The things that this person says might be legitimate. But I'm just letting you know that that's the reason I selected this video, because it can either surprise me by being an actually good point, a good video, or maybe just confirm my suspicions that I had already and disappoint me. So that's what we're doing here. Let's see. Oh, this video. So you're familiar with this one, Carl. We should do a watch party of Deep Throat on the Discord server. Maybe. Lots of drama from this one. Ooh. It's promoting a lack of perspective in reality. Glorified tokenism. That's kind of how the word token came to mind, yeah. Selective judge and good guy badge. I'll be down to watch. Hell yeah. Yeah, there's an assumed template or archetype rule that many expect writers to follow. Yeah, that feels very authoritarian to me in a way that feels antithetical to the spirit of creativity and the spirit of just representing reality as you see it, because people are complicated and they have a lot of different facets of their story and their personality and their motivations and how they react to things like this. Because to me, Angel Dust is such a great character. I love watching him. He's so unique. He's funny, he's sassy, he's cute, he's interesting, and he's got a dark side. He loves blood and violence, but he also is a victim of repeated, constant sexual abuse, and that makes him a really fascinating sort of three-dimensional character, that he just has all of these different traits, and he also has a heart. You know, he also has a part of him that actually does love other people and considers them. And so like all of that put together makes him so interesting. And I just feel like he's such a great character. This feels like this video is already setting me up to dislike this guy who's making it, because he's attacking this character, saying how not to write a victim of abuse. It just seems like we're getting off on the wrong foot already. Then I'll find the documentary I watched on it online. I watched a DVD copy I found to do post-movie. All right. As if there's an absolute objective way to write a character. Yeah. It's very antithetical to everything about writing in reality. Like, are any two people that are victims of abuse exactly the same? No, that's fucking stupid. It's stupid. Yeah, that's how I feel about it, just starting off. So let's see what he has to say.
But representation is important for any source of fiction. People of a particular group want to feel seen.
Okay. So I predicted. I haven't seen this video at all. I have not even clicked on this video. I just added it to my playlist by clicking the 3 dots in the corner of the thumbnail. Immediately, in the first 5 seconds, he's talking about representation and how it's important. So this immediately just confirms my suspicion about what the ideology of this creator would be. It's this ideology that I hate. The representation ideology.
And understood, and most of all, not feel like they are alone. And that's why good representation is important. It can help people feel seen, while also educate those who are unfamiliar with a certain group of people. But because it is so important, it's also a tragedy in most cases when a piece of media has bad representation. It creates a harmful caricature that reinforces negative stereotypes. Stereotypes that bleed into real life. Most people won't even be able to
see, reinforces negative stereotypes that bleed into real life. So we're legislating what we are allowed to portray, the experiences in life that we see in real life, if we're allowed to portray them or not, based on what the social impact will be on other people. That's such a bullshit approach to creativity. It's such an anti-creative mindset. The fact is, stereotypes are based on truth. I mean, there's that great, wonderful musical, Avenue Q. It had a lot of wisdom in it. And one of the things that musical stated was, Ethnic jokes might be uncouth, but you laugh because they're based on truth. Don't take them as personal attacks. Everyone enjoys them, so relax. Great song, and totally on point with its messaging. Stereotypes are based on the truth. And so in saying that you are not allowed to show examples of negative stereotypes, what you are saying is you are not allowed to tell the truth. That is what you are saying. Whether you know it or not, that is what you are saying. You are not allowed to tell the truth in media. You have to create this lie that says we're all equal and we're all perfect and we're all these marginalized groups are just, they're just innocent victims who never had any negative traits. It's a bland, boring, post-human way of being creative. It is utterly dystopian, in my opinion.
Tell if those stereotypes or traits are harmful or not because they are just not properly educated on the particular.
Let's see, we have a lot of comments here. Representation is important while promoting a lack of perspective. Oh, you watched the video. Interesting. Yeah, maybe it's important to represent all things, not just the things that are politically convenient to you. In that sense, representation might be important. There was a post on Lily Orchard's god-awful writer tips list that said victims of abuse should never be victims. Yeah, like, why? They are literally victims. You can find representation if you look for it. It's not hard. Is there supposed to be only one type of image of everything? Stereotypes are based on realistic constants. That's true, of course. There's outliers, but it's a stereotype for a reason. Yeah. This was remarkably stupid to me because one of my favorite villains is the main villain from Like a Dragon Gaiden, who is a rape victim and a villain. Yeah. Villains, not victims on the first comment. It's very gilded and decadent, as well as fucking demeaning to victims of abuse. It feels very sterile and overly sanitized. Yes. Yeah, I agree with all that.
Particular group of people that is being poorly represented, and that's why it is crucial to have good representation. You do not want to create a false narrative because of bad writing. But unfortunately, there are some stories out there that create a bad narrative through poor
It's not bad writing, necessarily, if it's just politically inconvenient to you.
Representation. Case in point, Angel Dust from Hazbin Hotel.
This body was
made to be exploited.
Pinky. Come on, keep talking dirty.
Now, I don't think I've ever come across a character so poorly represented, but also so greatly praised by the general audience. Hazbin Hotel is already a pretty controversial show for valid and invalid reasons. And no, the show isn't bad because the word fuck is used more times than a drunk in an Irish pub. I feel that a lot of my own personal problems with the show boil down to one of its most popular characters, and I feel that way because it does a good job at representing the exact issues the show has. Angel Dust is one of the only homosexual characters in the entire show.
When you say a statement that's technically true, but totally misleading. Hazbin Hotel and Hell of a Boss are infamous for just being full of gay as fuck characters just everywhere. Everyone is some flavor or shade of gay in these shows. So it is laughable to make it out like Angel Dust is like some unique example in this show. No, he is not.
Entire gimmick is that he's a washed-up porn star / prostitute drug addict. Already his character.
This person does not help argue against my thought that forced sterilization might be a good idea. Oh, boy. So the way the character is written makes him feel uncomfortable, therefore it's bad. LOL. Okay. I've never seen the show, though. LMFAO probably won't. It's just funny to view third party. Yeah. Well, as a fan of the show, I have a lot of thoughts. Let's hear more.
Reinforcing negative gay stereotypes.
So he's talking about being a drug addict and a prostitute, but the thing is, like, he's in hell. And that was the whole gimmick. Like, I feel like people forget the whole gimmick of the show. It's pretty easy to forget, I guess, because the environment that they're in almost kind of feels normal once you get used to it. But they are in hell, guys. Like, you do realize they are in hell. And the whole point of hell is that it's supposed to be the worst, most depraved, most sinful place to be, where everyone there has hit rock bottom and is just totally nihilistic and doesn't give a shit about anything because they've already damned themselves. They are already eternally damned and there's nowhere to go. They have no way out of it. So that is an important aspect of this. Like, we are not talking about a normal human being who happens to be gay and is stereotyped as a prostitute and a drug addict. We're talking about a literal demon, okay?
It was a pretty big red flag for me starting the show, and one that I couldn't really shake away. The stereotype of gay...
Isn't a big bit of getting over your trauma from rape reclaiming your sexuality? Sorry if I'm jumping ahead, but it feels like you'll make that point. Well, that's kind of a part of Angel's psychology, is that he is very sexually aggressive and sexually adventurous. And I think that's just kind of how he always was. But it takes on an extra meaning when you see how he is so disenfranchised sexually. And that sexual disempowerment therefore combines with his already natural predilection towards sex in making him want to be sexually aggressive as a way of asserting his sort of rights over his own body that he feels deprived of. His autonomy. So that's a part of it, for sure. And that's in the subtext of the show, I think. It can be, but I'd recommend not just fucking a stranger for it. Yeah, well, Angel is a little bit extreme, I will admit.
Men being heavy drug users with insanely high sex drives is older than the creator of the show is. This is a stereotype that was being criticized in the 90s. This is a show that came out in 2023. It is wild to me that a character who is written like this is in a show that came out just last year. It wouldn't even bother me that much if Angel Dust being a party and play gay wasn't his entire personality. But just about every scene he is in, with a few exceptions, has to have humor or comments relating to him being a porn star or him liking drugs. And in between all of those...
And there's an important story reason for that. But if you don't care about story and all you care about is representation, then none of that shit matters. You just reduce everything. You're so reductive. Like, it's addressed in his big episode, Masquerade, where Husk is like, cut the act. You're doing this shtick where you're acting like this gay Bugs Bunny as if you just revel in sex and think it's fucking great and are just always horny, when I know that there's more to you than that, then you're not letting on, and you're just doing this as a cover to mask your true pain. So why don't you stop disrespecting me by thinking I'm a fucking idiot who's gonna fall for this shit, and just treat me like a real person, you know? Like, be real with me. Like, I'm not here to fucking placate your stupid ass sort of attention-seeking behavior. And of course, yeah, I mean, there's so much more to that story, but it's such a wonderful part of his arc in this show. And the fact that you can't appreciate it because you're so politicized that everything has to be just about optics. It's sad. It's really sad.
Scenes, you have him basically sexually harassing every male character and trying to make advances towards them, no matter what their sexuality is.
In your bedroom, maybe? Under the covers?
Yeah, and this is...
Maybe we can go...
This is such an important scene. This is the scene I was talking about.
Look together.
Don't.
Come on. I bet I can make those wings.
Which is also...
Yeah, and you didn't show the part right after that where he throws him on the floor and says, stop. Which is what this whole scene is about. That's why they showed that part, was to get to the other part.
Another negative gay stereotype. Now, since I already know the rebuttal to this, no, the show taking place in hell isn't an excuse for characters like this. More often than not, I see people use the "it takes place in hell" excuse to justify offensive characters or bad writing. But when you have systems like that...
Because when you are overly political, nothing about any kind of context matters. Nothing about what's actually true or resonates about the storytelling matters to you. It's all just fodder for your politics.
In place to fall back on when criticism is made, then it's more of a crutch for your writing.
No, it's not. You're conflating your own politics with writing quality. I bet your writing would be absolute dog shit because it would just be all about politics and optics rather than about telling real human relatable stories. That's bad writing when you do what this guy's recommending.
Rather than an actual world-building tool. Angel Dust is just offensive for the sake of being offensive, but truth be told, I don't even think VivziePop realizes that...
Send that video that you have, Claudia, in Discord, because this is going to be the last one for me tonight, because it's getting late here, and, you know, I've got to keep it quiet. I only have time for this video. I haven't even heard of any examples of bad writing from this guy. This guy's just like, bad writing is offending my sensibilities. Yeah, like, this isn't bad writing. It's just writing that is offensive to him personally. That's like such a weird, stupid way to be writing.
That he's offensive. I think she genuinely just doesn't know that he's a negative gay stereotype. And call me a snowflake all you want, but when your general audience of the show is like below the age of 13, then I do think it's important for you to have good representation.
Did it ever occur to you that Angel Dust is leaning into this negative gay stereotype because it's the way he has found to express himself and cope with the crushing anxiety and depression of his existence? Like, there's no subtlety with this guy. Like, he doesn't understand subtlety. He doesn't understand characterization. He's such a bad judge of media and literature.
In order to not send a bad narrative. Kids are really fucking impressionable, and if we learned anything from the internet in the past several years, it's that the content you put out will have an effect on people, negative or positive. The landscape...
Yeah, he uses iDubbbz saying, say nigger to Tana Mojo, and PewDiePie doing his bitch lasagna roast of T-Series. Wow, what horrible things. Yeah, those have had horrible consequences on our generation. I don't think so. You know, I was a teenager when that stuff was happening, and, you know, I don't think I've come out wrong for it. I've come out wrong for a lot of other things, but not because of that. In fact, I think that stuff has only added to my growth as a person, you know?
For queer people, both on the internet and outside of it, is already really, really hard. The last thing that we need right now is for more people to have reasons to hate us.
Like I said, he's like,
I'm giving
I'm
VivziePop the benefit of the
bad.
doubt
Yeah.
that she doesn't know that Angel Dust is a negative gay stereotype, because I assume, in good faith, that she isn't trying to be like that. but it still doesn't take away from the fact that this is...
I think the point is that, yes, he is a gay stereotype, and that is like part of the subtext, is that he's leaning into this stereotype of the homosexual because he hasn't figured out how to truly love himself as an individual, so he just has to conform to this sort of expectation that's put on him just because he's gay. I think that's a huge part of the subtext, is that he is a negative gay stereotype. I don't think that Vivzy Pop is oblivious to this, or whoever he's talking about is oblivious to this.
Still the character she wrote regardless. But that being said, this isn't the worst problem that I have with Angel Dust.
Oh, really? Isn't this show full of sex jokes and profanity? I'm pretty sure that at that point it's not on you to babysit kids and on the parents to choose. Yeah, that's a good point. This is not made for kids. So you can't really say like, oh, young people, blah, blah, blah. I mean, at the end of the day, like, if young people are old enough to watch adult entertainment, then it's just gonna, that's what it is. Like, adults have the right to make good entertainment that pleases them without having to worry about young impressionables. That's one of the things I wholeheartedly agree with Paul Zigo on. Paul Zigo, someone who has kind of abandoned sense in a lot of categories. I think that that's one of the ways he's totally based, is he's a real warrior for that right of adults to have their own good entertainment that they value, that's complex, that's edgy, that's provocative, that makes them feel and think and experience, and not having to whitewash it because kids might be viewing it, you know. I mean, him including the clip of iDub saying it with the intention of it being a negative and overreacting just makes it funny in the way it was intended when it was done. Yeah, like he's not understanding the point that iDubbbz was making when he did that. And it's funny because I think iDubbbz has kind of lost the point of what he was doing when he made that video with Tana. Because I think it was very much that Avenue Q mindset of, you know, we can choose to get offended, but it's really a choice because nobody's actually offended by this. Nobody's actually hurt by this. And I think he was just calling people's bluff. Like, nobody is actually offended by this. We're all just pretending that it is offensive. But we're not actually offended. Who is being hurt by this? Like, whose feelings were hurt by iDubbbz saying nigger? Nobody's. It was all just performative. And I think that was his whole point in doing that. iDubbbz lost it all. Dude fell off hard. Well, he's very hard on himself, and I kind of feel bad for him in that respect. I think that maybe he's gone through a positive evolution in some respects, but he hasn't quite figured out how to reconcile that with his old edgy personality, and it's sad. It's sad.
When I say come, you say yes, Valentino. When I say you are fucking 20 guys before lunch, you say yes, Valentino.
See, Vivzy Pop decided to make Angel Dust a victim of sexual assault. His recovery is a plotline in the show, and I don't have an issue with this on paper. Not only do I think it's important to represent male victims of abuse, but also queer men who were victims of it. Men, both gay and straight, have been victims of sexual assault, and it's something that hasn't been properly recognized in society, which is why the execution of Angel Dust and his abuse storyline upsets me to an endless degree. Now, before I open this can of worms and talk about my issues with this character, I should rip off the band-aid because I already know people are going to ask me in the comments. Yes, I am a victim of this kind of abuse myself, and I don't owe you or anybody else watching an in-depth explanation of it. It's my story to tell, and I'm not going to tell it here.
It's ultra sad that this guy himself is motivated out of this actual personal experience. that the personal experience of being sexually abused has turned him into this sort of political zombie who can't accept any depiction of sexual abuse that doesn't totally validate his feelings, because it just like sort of reinforces all of the negative feelings he must have felt about it for his whole life. That he can't see the great sort of storytelling of this character because he's so damaged by his own experience with it.
I'm bringing this up to make it clear that I have valid criticisms of this show and this character as a survivor myself. I also want to make it clear that this is not a review of this show itself, but more so a critique of one of the characters. I haven't finished this show and I don't plan on doing it. I just want to talk about the character that made me stop watching halfway through. With that out of the way, we should start talking about this.
Angel, baby, come home. It's not the same without you here. I miss you. Come.
So I'm assuming he stopped watching after episode 4, because that's halfway through the show, and that's the episode that really features Angel Dust prominently and tells his story in a really important way. It's also my favorite episode of Hazbin Hotel. I think it's a wonderful episode.
Back. Angel, you bitch! If you don't come home, you will be fucking greasy truckers for the next year!
Angel Dust works as a porn star for a character named Valentino, who has him under contractual obligation and takes advantage of him. Valentino's entire character is meant to be this pimp. And as a villain, I don't have a lot of issues with him, although I think giving a rapist character musical numbers is a bit tone-deaf in my opinion. I don't have a strong opinion about how Valentino is written one way or the other. I think he's very bland. A lot of my main issues stem from one episode, and that being Masquerade. It's the 4th episode of the show, and it's the one that got me to stop watching entirely. In the episode, Angel Dust has to deal with balancing his life at the hotel and his life at work. Charlie tries to get involved, but when she does, shit hits the fan, and it results in Angel Dust getting physically assaulted by Valentino. See, because Angel Dust is under Valentino's contract, he has to obey his command even if he doesn't consent. After being abused, Angel Dust kicks Charlie out in order to avoid being harmed more. The one good thing I have to say about the writing for this episode is that a lot of this abuse is comparable to the real-life abuse that the porn industry conducts on their actors. And to give credit where credit is due, the show does a good job at portraying that, even if it's a little over the top. This scene on its...
Well, it's it's kind of like a combination of the porn industry and the just sex industry, just like women who are under unofficial contract with pimps like this. Like, Valentino is the stereotypical Latino pimp in this show. And so he's like the pimp who's also the porn producer. So it's not exactly comparable to porn precisely, even though there are some overlaps, I think, between the exploitation of prostitutes and the exploitation of porn actors. But yeah.
Its own would be completely fine if it wasn't ruined by the musical number that follows it. The song Poison is just Angel Dust.
Let's see. Sounds like he's a prisoner of his trauma still. He is. Yeah, that's kind of what it sounds like to me. It seems, yeah. It's funny because it's basically the representation he wanted twice. Once as a gay man and once as a rape survivor, but he can't accept it because it's not exactly how he sees himself. Yeah, it's like, this actually is good representation. And it's good representation because it's showing this character as someone who's really complicated and has a lot of flaws, and like obviously somebody who is so beaten up and abused all the time is not going to be a perfect person. Why would they ever be a perfect person? You're not allowed to develop into a perfect person if you're that way, if that's your life experience. So yeah, it makes no sense to expect like an abuse victim to be this great guy, you know? I think, like, this is entirely whining. Like, yeah, it sucks a lot, truly, I know, but literally get over it. It's not the objective reality of writing, and it's very clearly from a place of wanting to regain control on things. Yeah.
Singing about being abused and how he is helpless to it. Is it a sad melodramatic song with slow and meaningful instrumentals? No. It's a techno dance song that removes any sort of seriousness that the song may have.
No. You don't understand the brilliance of this song being a dance number. Oh my God. You do not know how to write. You're an idiot when it comes to writing. This is the way you do it. You show that this is the nihilistic decay of this man's soul. He's this party animal who loves performing and dancing, but it's all just this lie, this cover up for what's really the darkness eating him on the inside. That's why it's so techno. That's why it's so like devoid of like organic noise, is because it's meant to be this artificial construction, this soulless song that he's singing that's really just him like pleading for somebody to listen to him, for somebody to see him for what he's really going through when he's really trying to numb his pain. I mean, that's what makes this so good. That was also what was so great about that song, the remix version of I Took a Pill in Ibiza by Mike Posner, where, you know, he goes, I took a pill in Ibiza to show Avicii I was cool, and when I was finally sober, I felt 10 years older, but fuck it was something to do. The reason that dance remix of that song was so good is not just because it was well made, and it was well made. It wasn't just like a shitty, cheap dance remix that frat boys play at their Halloween parties like happened yesterday across the fucking street for me. I live at UNR. But no, it's also because it meant to express the hollowness of this sort of club rave dance scene. The same exact thing that the movie Saturday Night Fever was commenting on. I mean, people have been doing this kind of social commentary ever since the 1970s. And this guy totally lacks perspective on this and thinks that it should be this like somber, sober, like Angel Dust is not a sober character. He's literally a drug addict who gets fucked up all the time. It would not make sense for his song to be sober if he's not sober. You know what I'm saying? Very Mechanical Animals-esque, actually. Yes, exactly the same idea as with the Omega songs and Mechanical Animals. That very same message. It's totally exactly what they were trying to do with this song, Poison. That's one of the reasons this is such a great song. Party Monster. It's like people bitching about Pistol Whipped on the rare occasions they find it. I'm not familiar enough with Pistol Whipped to comment on it.
It doesn't help that the music video has scenes of Angel Dust essentially being abused right in between scenes of him dancing like it's a Kesha music.
Oh my God, are you so oblivious that you can't understand the symbolic importance of that? That this scene of him dancing is what's like his coping mechanism that's going on in his mind. But the whole time, like you see in the background, that picture of him just in pain. It's like this is his escape, but it's always lingering in his mind, and these flashes of it appear in his mind over and over throughout the day, and he can never escape the pain that he's feeling, but he's trying so desperately to escape it with all the drugs and the partying and the dancing and the entertaining and the being this big, larger than life, big-titted Angel Dust personality that he's constructed for himself. I mean, do you not understand anything about screenwriting? This is the most basic shit.
Music video. And look, I get that there are songs out there with serious lyrics and messages that sound upbeat and cheerful.
Yeah, and Pumped Up Kicks, I believe, was meant to be kind of an irony, a kind of crude irony, kind of a poor taste, but brilliant execution. So not quite the same thing. Not quite as much depth of feeling there. But because these songs are not about representation, they don't represent some like disenfranchised group, he doesn't care. Because it has this political thing about him. By the way, this guy, the guy who did Werewolves of London, Warren Zevon, I guess is his name. I never knew his name. I just know that album cover from Werewolves of London, which is a pretty good song. But anyway.
But the biggest thing that sets those songs apart from Poison is that Poison is created for the sole purpose of a cartoon character whose entire gimmick is being slutty and provocative, while other songs are made with the purpose of
the fuck are you talking about? No, it's created for the purpose of showing the true depth of this character, that he's not just a cartoon character who's all about being slutty and provocative, that he's a person with a deep emotional life that's being just constantly beaten up by this life that he's living, that is just utterly exploitative and miserable, and no life that you would wish on your worst enemy. That you can almost see him as being a character with a lot of strength, that he manages to live this life and still walk around as if he's this confident person. That's what it's about.
Conveying a serious message. Foster the People didn't write Pumped Up Kicks because they wanted to create a cartoon character about a school shooter. They wrote it because it's an actual song with a message behind it. Any sort of message that's in...
Are you fucking serious? You don't think this song has a message? You are such an idiot. You're such an asshole, honestly. You're just such a dickhead. Like, fuck you. I don't care if you were raped. You don't, that doesn't give you the right to be just totally clueless and unsympathetic to someone who's clearly trying to tell a deep story. Oh boy, Kinderfeld would kill his mind. That song does have overtones of sexual abuse. Actually, The Long Hard Road Out of Hell would give him a heart attack after the first two paragraphs. Yeah, that book is crazy.
And Poison is completely lost in translation because of this music video. What also doesn't help is knowing that this music video, along with many, many other scenes, is storyboarded by somebody who has an...
Yeah, and of course, bringing up this guy, which I heard about on Reddit, this person, the Horyboard artist, who has the right... This person has the right to have a rape fetish and enjoy reveling in that on Twitter. I don't think that's wrong necessarily. Now, I have heard that this person has been like contacting minors and stuff. That's kind of, yeah, no, that's like the line you don't cross. So I don't know. There's drama about this person, but it's just like such a cheap shot to be like, yeah, look at this one storyboard artist and how degenerate this person is. I mean, honestly, it feels like a right-wing attack, honestly.
Actual rape fetish. Somebody...
Yeah, well, I have a rape fetish too, so I don't really give a shit about that criticism. Is this guy normally a media review channel? If he is, he's awful at his job. Yeah, I don't know what his normal thing is. What does he normally do? Let's see. Wow, this is his only popular video. He just, yeah, he doesn't make very many videos. This one just blew up because it was so shitty, I guess. I don't know, but 34,000 people liked it. Oh, then the dumb waiter with the neighbor. Is it just me, or does the AVGN theme fit so well with Smells Like Teen Spirit? Does it? I guess they both have the da-da-da-da-da at the beginning. That would be an interesting mashup. Is this guy unaware of how common rape fantasy has? Yeah, I mean, they're like, dude, violence and sex are like extremely linked in people's minds. Like, they're so commonly grouped together. And like power play is an extremely important part of the way people sort of fetishize their sexual encounters and their relationship with sexuality. The idea of power and what it means in terms of sex. I mean, it's like a huge... These people want to sterilize sex to the point where it's nothing but just this bland, totally inhuman thing that doesn't actually represent how people really feel about sex. I've always felt that way about these SJWs. Yeah, honestly, LOL, I've been raped. It's a non-issue. There's still a fantasy element to it that I have with it. MF just disregards sexuality and its complexity as well as differing perspectives and such. Yeah, I mean, I don't blame this guy for having trauma over being raped, but it's just like have some perspective at least. You yourself talked about the more aggressive part of male sexuality in the snippet of Fundamentally Loathsome 3 on your Patreon. Yeah, and I think that's a really important thing that we need to talk about more, is how there's this link between sex and violence in our minds, and how it affects the male psyche in particular, because men are in this position of being the sort of perpetrator role that a lot of them are not very comfortable being in. And it kind of fucks with men, I think, in a way that we don't talk about. But I feel like people like this just want to like ignore that side of our psyches and act like the violent aspect of sexuality is some aberration, some degenerate aberration that isn't real, isn't legitimate, and so we should persecute it. And that just feels like, honestly, like Nazi rhetoric almost. I mean, it just feels so like not understanding the human condition at all.
That Vivzipop frequently defends on a regular. I can't watch this music video and assume that it's being made in good faith when part of it is being made by somebody who thinks that the abuse that Angel Dust suffers is hot. So when somebody who isn't a victim of it...
But, guy, it is hot. It's fucking hot, dude. Like, I don't know how to tell you this. Like, what's hot to someone else might not be hot to you, and that's okay. We have different opinions about what is hot. I think that's what the whole LGBT movement, acceptance movement, was about. That people are allowed to disagree on what is hot and what is not hot. To you, it isn't hot, and that's okay. But that doesn't mean other people are bad for thinking it's hot. It's willful ignorance for a political line, but it can be hot. Yes.
essay themselves and has a fetish for non-con is hired by somebody to storyboard for scenes of the character.
Non-con, non-consent. Okay, I mean that's just redundant.
In the show with the essay storyline, then at that point, I can't assume that Vizzy isn't ignorant to what she's doing. This episode doesn't get any better, by the way. The next scene has Angel Dust having a freak out over Husk calling his flamboyant, horny act fake. So he storms off to a random bar, only to be picked up by Husk after he almost got himself roofied. When Husk confronts the self-destructive behavior, Angel Dust opens up and saying that it was a way for him to forget about everything in the hopes that him getting high and wasted will ruin him enough that Valentino will lose interest.
I can ruin myself enough in the process. If I end up broken, I won't be his favorite toy anymore. And maybe he'll let me go.
Abuse, and especially sexual abuse, leaves people with a lot of trauma, and the ways in which they cope with the trauma can be unhealthy. Angel Dust's way of coping with it is undeniably unhealthy, and it really doesn't help when this unhealthy coping mechanism is so glamorized throughout the entire show that...
It's not. It is not glamorized. It's... I mean, there's a complexity to it where in a way you can see it as entertaining, but it's not glamorized. The show, like the episodes that he didn't see, like episode 6, for instance, showed how there was actually, like, Angel Dust was conflicted over whether he should take drugs at the sex club because he knew this was an unhealthy coping mechanism and he wanted to get into heaven. And so he wanted to reform himself and be a better person. But I guess he didn't see that episode because he said he stopped after episode 4. So. But yeah, it's like, it's clearly shown to be an unhealthy coping mechanism. It's not shown to be a great thing for him. But it's also shown to be a part of his personality. And in that sense, I don't think you necessarily need to take it away from him altogether. I think there's a wisdom in moderation here, which this show understands. And it's a nuance that this guy doesn't understand because he doesn't know what the fuck nuance is. Glamorized? It doesn't seem glamorized at all, just from that scene alone. Yeah, just from that scene alone, it doesn't seem glamorized. I mean, literally, he was showing a scene of Angel Dust accepting a drink that he knew was drugged. That's not glamorizing his behavior. That's showing how rock bottom he's at this point. There's a complexity, and that's what he's not getting at. The complexity he just can't understand. I haven't seen the show, and it's something I get it. LOL. Somehow I get it. Yeah.
Jokes are being made about it constantly. Let me make this very clear. This is not okay. Self-destructing is not how you deal with trauma. It will only make things worse. I'm saying this because it's very obvious.
It doesn't always only make things worse. There's always unexpected things in life, you know? You can't just make a definitive statement like that, like self-destruction will always make things worse. It tends to. But sometimes people need to hit rock bottom before they can get back up. I mean, there's just a lot of nuance to the situation. There's a lot of different ways that life can go, paths that it can lead you down, twists and turns that you can encounter. I don't necessarily think that self-destructive behavior is always 100% universally going to lead to just further and further bad outcomes.
The show is afraid to explicitly say it, and I know that hearing me say it does not mean that it's easy to change, because I get that it's hard. But when shows like these that glamorize these unhealthy coping mechanisms...
And I'm someone who has a lot of unhealthy coping mechanisms, as you can clearly see. I mean, I'm somebody who lives this to a degree, you know. There are things that are definitely wrong with me and the way I think about myself and life, and I'm a very dysfunctional person who just is always you know, always making a lot of bad decisions, I think, you know, always doing the wrong thing, the supposedly wrong thing. But it's, you know, one of my favorite lines from a movie is from Alice in Wonderland, where she says, I give myself some very good advice, but I very seldom follow it. I think I even quoted that in a video I made a long time ago, the Bill Maher video. But it's a quote that I just love because it just encapsulates so much about life and coping mechanisms and the way we treat ourselves and the way we just can't resist doing the wrong thing, even though we know it's wrong, because our super egos might know it's wrong, but our egos just can't understand the super ego. You know, the ego just cannot understand the super ego. It just doesn't compute. It just doesn't get it. So nothing we can really learn can really train our egos to get in line with the super ego. It just never works. And this character is a wonderful example of that.
Start to get popular and more people start seeing it, then people will start to have this idea that this is normal.
I think he's confusing the glitzy aesthetic for actual glamorization. Well, and the fact that it's treated as a joke a lot of the time, and it's part of what makes his personality so lovable. But I think there's a nuance there where, yeah, it can be a part of his lovable personality, but it can also, it can also be self-destructive in another way. Let me make it clear, it's hilarious to joke about your own self-destructive tendencies. Sometimes you need to destroy parts of yourself that need to be destroyed. I like that. I like that idea. Sometimes you need to destroy parts of yourself that need to be destroyed. What a very poignant line. Yeah, that Alice in Wonderland line I just love. I give myself some very good advice, but I very seldom follow it. I just love that. That was something when I was working at Grocery Outlet, I used to say that to myself all the time. I give myself some very good advice, but I very seldom follow it. It's like telling a kid not to eat the marshmallow in front of them. Exactly. Exactly.
And it's not. The show is more comfortable showing the act actually happening while adding sparkle on filters in order for people to make scene compilations of Angel Dust's slain. Angel Dust opening up about his abuse and his unhealthy coping mechanism is fine on its own, but when you follow that up with another musical number...
Yeah, but actually showing that unhealthy coping mechanism is wrong for some reason. It's okay for the show to talk about it, but actually showing it and putting you in his mind as it's happening, no, that's wrong. This is such a brain-dead take. This had no thought put into it.
Then it sort of cheapens those serious moments. Loser Baby isn't as bad as Poison, but it's still really tone-deaf. It's another upbeat song, except this time it's about how your abuse isn't unique and you need to stop whining like a bitch and find company in another...
It's not supposed to be negative in that way. He's not saying stop whining like a bitch. He's saying let's both whine like bitches together because we're both fucking losers and we're both bitches and we deserve to have each other to keep company. He wasn't saying that Angel Dust should stop whining. He was saying that Angel Dust should start whining. That was the whole thing he was telling him from the beginning. He was like, stop being this fake bullshit version of yourself. Be real. Tell me what's going on with you because I might be able to relate to it. So yeah, he was saying start whining. He's not getting anything that this show is laying down.
People who are in the same situation as you. What a great message to send. It doesn't even work in this show's context because it's comparing Angel and Husk's situations like they are at all similar. I'm sorry, but Angel Dust being forced into sexual actions against his will is not the same as...
It's worse. I will admit, Angel Dust's situation is worse. But the thing is, Husk felt so alone. You gotta realize what he's saying in the song. He felt so alone for all of his life in hell after this point where he makes the deal with Alistair. Because he felt like just nobody got him, nobody could relate to him. Nobody, like everyone was just living these fake lives, being fake fucking people, pretending to be living these good lives when everyone knows they're all in hell. They're all just living shit, horrible existences. But they're pretending to be something they're not. And so that moment where Angel shows vulnerability and shows that he's finally willing to be real with him, he was like, wow, I can relate to this because this is how I've been feeling for so long, and I've never had anyone to talk to about it. But of course, this subtext, he just goes totally over his head because he's totally politically motivated and doesn't actually care about real storytelling.
Husk betting all on black and losing. I know what you may be thinking, and no, I don't hate musicals. Hazbin Hotel is...
Can we just make it a rule to stop one-upping each other about trauma? That would be a good idea. I don't think he's trying to one-up anyone about trauma. I just think that he has a warped perspective about it. I like using that term, I've noticed. Warped perspective. I used that today in my Vedin video. Warped perspective. It's true about so much in life. It's warped.
It's just a bad musical. End of story. If I need to show how to properly handle serious moments in a story while still being musical, then we need to talk about Rent. Rent is a musical from 1994 that had a 2005 film adaptation with the original cast. The musical is about a group of bohemians who struggle with their life in 1989 America, facing conflicts with their own personal struggles of finances, sexuality, and addiction. One of the topics the musical does a really good job at handling is the AIDS crisis in America. There's a song early on.
Yeah, I remember Ray William Johnson making a joke about that, saying that Rent was a musical about AIDS. And he showed the word rent, and underneath rent, in parentheses, it said a condom. Ray William Johnson was kind of edgy back in the day. Wait, what's going on? Okay, I'm muted. Sorry. Yeah, back in the day, you were allowed to be really edgy on YouTube. It's not like that anymore. We don't have the freedom anymore. I feel like I'm one of the few old school YouTubers still left, you know? Like I'm keeping alive that 2010, 2011 YouTube spirit in the modern age, you know? That's what I'm about. I'm not monetized. Fuck Google AdSense, you know? I'm keeping that shit real. Me and the Archfiend.
The film where one of the main characters by the name of Roger sings about his remaining motivations with writing music. One song, Glory, is an emotional...
An overly dominant superego can lead to a personality that's judgmental and extremely moralistic. People with a strong superego may be overly harsh on themselves and others. God, that's so him. This guy has an overly dominant superego. That's what's going on with this guy. Love that you've revived Vedin, by the way. Yeah, I'm doing it again. I'm doing it again. You're basically Rusty Cage if you went a different route from the Knife Gang song. Interesting. I mean, I know Rusty Cage, but I guess I don't know him the way you know him, because I don't really know what you mean. I just know him as, yeah, he did the Knife Game song, and he did that podcast with Emblem and Mumkey Jones, which was a good podcast, but I think Emp Lemon left for some reason, and then they turned it into some shit show with Reactor, and Reactor's like a boring tapioca piece of shit, even though he's against Tim Pool, and I like that because Tim Pool is literally his brother. But yeah.
A plea from the perspective of Roger, who grieves for his girlfriend and himself after they were both diagnosed with AIDS, brought on by their drug abuse. In 1989, having AIDS is basically a death sentence. At this point in the story, Roger's girlfriend killed herself as she couldn't handle living with it, and Roger sings about wanting to leave an impact on the world and to not feel as though he lived for nothing, wanting to go out in a blaze of glory with just one song. It's this motive that pushes him throughout the film to write that one song to leave behind when he inevitably dies from his AIDS. This song is one of the best examples of how to handle serious topics in a musical setting. It's a dramatic and intense song that fits the themes of not just the lyrics, but the film as a whole. Throughout it, Roger pushes away his love interest.
I like the idea of a musical named Rent. It's like this thing that just is clawing away at us in our lives. Rent. You know, this thing that seemingly has no value, but we slavishly devote our lives to just like pouring money into it. I love the idea of calling a musical Rent and making it just about being just a basic ass broke shitty person in New York, you know? It's a great idea for a musical. I've never actually seen it before. He also built a guillotine in his backyard. Dude, there was this really cute girl who we used to do Dungeons and Dragons with. She was like a dungeon master. And I went to a bar with her recently. And she was talking all about, she could not stop talking about the guillotine and how much she loved the guillotine. And I was like, okay, I get it. The guillotine is cool. But she was just like in love with the guillotine. This how-to and properly bullshit is so annoying because it implies that there's somehow a platonic ideal of how to handle a story, which is so far from the truth. Yeah.
Not because he doesn't share the same feelings, but because he doesn't want her to fall in love with someone who is living on borrowed time. The musical isn't...
Yeah, like this resonates with him, but because like Has-Been Hotel just didn't resonate with him, I guess, and so he's like overly critical of it. But like, to be really critical, you gotta be critical of yourself. And that's the problem, is he's not very critical of himself. And I think if he would be more critical of himself, he could see that Has-Been Hotel actually is telling a really good story, you know? It's just doing it in a different way. It's just doing different things with what it's doing.
Isn't afraid to tackle heavy subject matter, and the way it goes about it is impactful and respectful at the same time. It's a really good film, and I definitely recommend watching it. It also failed to make a profit in the box office. Has-Been Hotel wants to have serious subject matter, but it also wants every song to be something to dance to. And in most cases, you can't have your cake and eat it too.
It doesn't want every song to be something to dance to. There were slow songs in Has-Been Hotel, but that's just not what this was about. This wasn't supposed to be a slow song, and there's a very important storytelling reason for it not to be a slow song, and you just don't understand it because you're a fucking idiot.
In no way am I saying that Roger from Rent and Angel Dust have similar struggles, but I bring up Rent as an example on how to handle serious topics while still maintaining a musical formula. Having a character like Angel Dust and giving him an abuse storyline while not taking it seriously by adding musical numbers like...
I don't think anyone's complaining about the whole musical aspect of it. Like, I think that's like a thing you decided to head off at the pass that wasn't even coming for you. I think the complaint is that you're just a fucking idiot who doesn't understand creativity.
poison, and then having somebody who finds the abuse from Valentino to be hot storyboard your musical number, what it ends up doing is creating a parody of itself.
Scold songs are danceable and depressing. I don't see his point. Yeah, you can have danceable and depressing songs.
That hammers in this idea that being a survivor of abuse is...
I mean, the lyrics of that song, like, let me pull up. Let me pull up the lyrics of this song. I'm not above a love to cash in another lover underneath those flashing lights, another one of those ruthless nights. So just talking about the depressing emptiness of being a whore, you know? And just how it feels, the ruthless, like that line, ruthless nights, just how much in pain he is because of these experiences. I should have guessed this would happen. I should have known it when I looked in your red hot eyes, spewing all your red hot lies. You know, talking about Valentino and how he feels guilty for the fact that he fell for Valentino's trap, that he fell for Valentino's sort of fake sincerity. And he feels like an idiot that he fell for that. And now he's just living every day for the rest of his life in self-hatred because he thinks that if only he were smart enough, he could have seen through this evil man. What's the worst part of this hell? I can only blame myself. There you go. That's the same point I just said, reiterated. Because I know you're poison. You're feeding me poison, addicted to this feeling. I can't help but swallow up your poison. I've made my choice, and every night I'm living like there's no tomorrow. So now he's talking about his addiction. He's just like, he has already poisoned himself beyond his ability to change. He feels totally powerless, and so now all he can do is just live every day of his life in total suicidal self-destructiveness with no care for his own safety, just living totally on the edge, doing every drug imaginable, just trying to numb himself from that pain. So I think you get the point. That the lyrics of this song that he's talking about are not glamorizing this situation at all. They're really exposing the deep emotional pain he's feeling, and that's what the whole point of the song is. If a piece of art doesn't connect with you, it's important to interrogate yourself as to why that might be. Try to examine why this may be appealing to others and then work from there. Checking your priors, so to speak. This guy failed to genuflect. He judged before judging himself. I agree.
Girly pop or slay. Suffering does not create better people. It just creates suffering. And I know for a fact that it is not Vivzy Pop's intention to create a character like Angel Dust in this manner. But it doesn't change the fact that it still happened, and this is the character that is being praised and looked up to. Abuse is not something to be fetishized, and being a survivor of it is not an aesthetic.
There has never been a more wrong statement than that.
Nor is it as glamorous as the show tries to make it look in musical numbers. It's something that sticks with you for the rest of your life. It never goes away. Has-Been Hotel is a show that comes so close to expressing that point, but it fumbles it in every single way possible.
Dude, victims of abuse fetishize their own abuse. This guy just doesn't even know what he's talking about, and he's someone who's personally experienced it. That's the whole thing with Umberto Eco that we were just talking about. Like, that was a guy who personally experienced this thing, but does that mean he always knows what he's talking about? No, not necessarily.
Everyone has their own way of coping with abuse, but the show acts as though there is nothing wrong with how Angel Dust copes with his abuse. Loser Baby has proven to me that the show does not understand why this is an issue. I am tired of people talking about Angel Dust like this is the best way.
You just don't understand anything about writing. You don't understand anything about this show, what it's trying to communicate. You're a fucking dipshit. I think we've established that.
To write an abuse victim, because it's not. Angel Dust is a poorly written character that reinforces negative gay stereotypes, while at the same time being a harmful representation of what it's like to be a survivor of abuse. If we have gotten to the point where scenes of clear fetishization and romanticism is viewed as powerful representation, then the indie animation scene is in desperate need of a paradigm shift, because this is not how abuse survivors should be written in the future. Hazbin Hotel and Angel Dust should be viewed as an example of what not to do when it comes to that.
Conclusion after
this
all
was not an easy video to make, but I want to end it off by saying that if you enjoyed Hazbin Hotel and Angel Dust as a character, that's fine. I don't want you to walk away from this thinking that your opinion is less than mine. People have their own reasons for liking media, and the discourse surrounding this show and the harassment that people receive just for liking it is unacceptable. You can have your reasons for disliking a show, but people can also have their reasons for liking it as well. Everything that I have said in this video is in relation to my own personal life, and I criticize the show because I want to see it improve in a second season. I want it to give me a reason to keep watching, not for it to give...
Now, I think if the show catered to you and what you want, it would immediately start being a shittier show. It would immediately start sucking. So I don't want you to be satisfied. I want you to keep hating this show because I love the show, and I think the show is better when you hate it. I very much disagree. Suffering is literally a motivator to get you out of a situation. It's designed to move you out of a bad situation. Yeah, that's kind of what it is. But I think there is another way in which suffering can debilitate you from moving out of a bad situation. So it's also it can also be actually kind of counterproductive. When people start complaining about how something is glamorizing so and so, my alarm bells start ringing. Call it childhood trauma, but isn't this the same shit the Christian right cry about all the time? It's just the same kind of puritanism, you know. Yes, it's a very conservative impulse, like Marx said, a very platonic and idealist view. Yeah, because we can definitely plan out our self-destructive paths with complete accuracy of what we'll do. Yeah, this sort of idea that the human being is this rational entity and that we don't do things that hurt ourselves, but also help ourselves paradoxically at the same time. Like, life is so paradoxical and full of confusion and full of opposites and full of catch-22s. Suffering is oftentimes a mean to motivate yourself to be a better person. For example, with the bad side effects of drug abuse often motivate people to get off the stuff. Anyway, I'm so looking forward to Fundamentally Loathsome Part 3. Take as much time as you need. Big Forever Dirt fan, by the way. Yeah, well, luckily I recovered my lost data from Fundamentally Loathsome Part 3. It came back as I thought it probably wouldn't, but it did come back. So I'm going to be working on that, as well as other projects. I'm retooling the Italy project, kind of making it, kind of reimagining it in my mind. My original impression of it didn't pan out, so I'm reimagining it. But I feel like once I get that sorted out and get that first episode finished, I'll be able to make another episode and not take nearly as much time. Fundamentally Loathsome is a lot more straightforward, so I have been able to work on that pretty easily. But yeah, that's about all the time I have. Thank you for watching this stream. This was a really good stream. I think I'm going to cut that up into 2 chunks for my reaction channel, my Forever Dirt Reacts side channel, because I really liked both of those chunks. So, see you guys later.